The fluorescent lights hummed with that particular frequency that made Adrian's teeth ache. He'd been sitting in the hard plastic chair for 3 hours now, watching uniformed officers shuffle papers and speak in low voices behind the counter. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his backpack, the only possession they'd let him keep. "How long did you overstay?" the officer had asked when they pulled him aside at Lax. "6 months," Adrian had whispered, knowing it was over. Knowing that his desperate attempt to build a life in Los Angeles to escape the suffocating expectations back in Manila had just come crashing down. They'd taken his phone, his wallet, even the novel he'd been reading on the plane, a battered copy of Giovanni's Room that he'd read so many times the spine had split. They'd photographed him, fingerprinted him, and now they were processing him for removal. Adrian was 28 years old, and he'd never felt more like a child. "Raise, Adrian?" A different officer appeared, clipboard in hand. This one was younger, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and tired eyes. "Follow me." Adrian stood on shaky legs and followed the officer down a corridor he hadn't seen before. The walls were painted an institutional beige that seemed designed to drain hope. They passed several doors, some with small windows, others solid metal, until the officer stopped at one marked only with a number, 7. "In here," the officer said, his voice not unkind. "Someone will be with you shortly." The door opened onto a small room painted entirely black, walls, ceiling, even the floor. There was a metal table bolted to the ground and 2 chairs. A single camera blinked red in the corner. Adrian's heart hammered. Am I being arrested?" Adrian managed to ask. "Just an interview room," the officer said. "Have a seat." The door closed with a heavy click, and Adrian was alone. He sat in one of the chairs and tried to steady his breathing. This was it. They'd put him on a plane back to Manila, back to his father's pharmaceutical company where a vice president position waited for him like a gilded cage. Back to family dinners where his mother asked about girlfriends and his father talked about legacy and tradition. Back to closets that locked from the inside. Minutes passed, 10, 20. Adrian counted the acoustic tiles on the ceiling, 36, and then counted them again to make sure. The door opened. The man who entered wasn't wearing a uniform. He wore dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that Adrian tried very hard not to notice. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with warm brown skin and black hair that curled slightly at his temples. He carried a folder and had the kind of face that could have belonged to a professor or a poet, thoughtful, with dark eyes that seemed to actually see. "Adrian Reyes," the man said, and Adrian was surprised by his voice. It was gentle, almost musical. "Yes," Adrian said. "I'm Marcus Delgado. I'm an immigration officer, but I'm also a liaison for certain, sensitive cases." Marcus sat in the chair across from Adrian and opened his folder. "Your case has been flagged." Adrian's stomach dropped. "Flagged? You overstayed a tourist visa by 6 months. You were working illegally at a bookstore in Silver Lake. You also made a request for asylum based on your sexual orientation that was never processed." Marcus looked up from the file. "That last part, that's why I'm here." Adrian felt his face flush. The asylum application had been a desperate move, filed through a community legal clinic after he'd already overstayed. He'd known it was a long shot. The Philippines wasn't considered dangerous enough, his claims not extreme enough. He'd never been physically attacked, never been imprisoned. He'd just been slowly suffocated by expectations and silence. "I understand if it's not enough," Adrian said quietly. "I know I broke the law by staying." Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying him. "Tell me about Manila," he finally said. "Tell me why you didn't want to go back." Adrian looked at the black walls, at the camera in the corner, at this stranger who held his fate in his hands. And then, because he had nothing left to lose, he told the truth. "My father owns a pharmaceutical company, very successful, very traditional. I'm the only son, so everything was supposed to pass to me. The company, the name, the legacy, but there were conditions, unspoken conditions." Adrian twisted his hands together. "I had to be the right kind of son, I had to date the right kind of women, I had to want the right kind of life." "But you didn't," Marcus said softly. "No," Adrian met his eyes. "I didn't, and when I was 25 my father found out why. He found messages on my phone from a guy I'd been seeing, nothing explicit, just enough." "What happened?" "He didn't kick me out, that would have been too public, too shameful. Instead, he sent me to see priests, therapists, anyone who might fix me. My mother cried every day. My younger sister stopped talking to me because she was afraid she'd be tainted by association. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. They didn't hate me, that would have been easier. They just wanted to erase that part of me like it was a software glitch they could debug. Marcus was very still, his dark eyes never leaving Adrian's face. So when I got a tourist visa to attend a friend's wedding in LA, I just stayed. I knew it was illegal. I knew I was burning bridges. But I got a job at this little bookstore. I found an apartment with 3 roommates. I went to West Hollywood on Friday nights and nobody stared at me. Nobody looked at me like I was broken. Adrian laughed bitterly. I had 6 months of being myself. That's more than I had in 27 years in Manila. The room was very quiet. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to have faded. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally. Adrian looked up startled. What? I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry your family couldn't see you for who you are. Marcus leaned back in his chair and Adrian saw something in his expression, not pity but recognition, understanding. You're gay, Adrian said. It wasn't a question. Marcus smiled slightly. Is it that obvious? No, Adrian faltered. Why are you here? Why did they send you? Because I volunteer with an LGBTQ advocacy group that works on immigration cases. When your asylum application got flagged, they asked if I'd do the interview. Marcus reopened the folder. I'm going to be honest with you, Adrian, your case is difficult. The Philippines has discrimination, yes, but you haven't been physically harmed. You have family resources. On paper, you don't meet the threshold for asylum. Adrian felt the last bit of hope drain out of him, so I'm going back. I didn't say that. Marcus met his eyes again. There are other options. They're complicated and they'll take time, but they exist. The question is whether you're willing to fight for them. What kind of options? Well, you can't adjust status while you're in deportation proceedings, but you could potentially request voluntary departure instead of removal. That gives you time to leave on your own terms and doesn't bar you from re-entry. Then from outside the US, you could reapply for asylum with more documentation or explore other visa categories. Marcus paused. Or there's another route, a more unconventional one. Adrian leaned forward. I'm listening. There's a pilot program for certain asylum cases that allows applicants to remain in the US under supervision while their cases are reviewed. It's meant for people who don't pose a flight risk and who have compelling humanitarian reasons for protection. You'd need a sponsor, someone who could provide housing and ensure you attend all your hearings. The program is small, selective, and experimental. But if you got in, you'd have a chance to build a real case. What's the catch? Marcus smiled slightly. The catch is that I'd be your supervising officer, we'd have to meet regularly, and I'd be filing reports on your case. It's a lot of bureaucracy and there's no guarantee you'd ultimately get asylum, but it's better than being deported tomorrow. Adrian stared at him. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Because I know what it's like, Marcus said quietly. My parents came from El Salvador in the 80s, political asylum, but it took years for their case to be approved. Years of uncertainty, of supervised check-ins, of living in legal limbo. I grew up watching them fight for the right to stay, and I swore that when I was old enough I'd help other people do the same. He paused. And because I came out when I was 17 and my father didn't speak to me for 2 years. So yeah, I know what it's like to be erased by the people who are supposed to love you. Yeah. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. This stranger, this immigration officer in a black room, understood him in a way no one else had in so long. What do I have to do? Adrian asked. Marcus pulled out a pen. First, we fill out a lot of paperwork. The apartment Marcus found for Adrian was small, a studio in Koreatown with bars on the windows and a radiator that clanked like a prisoner rattling chains. But it was his. Adrian had a key, he had an address, he had a reason to wake up in the morning. The terms of his supervision were strict. He couldn't work legally, but Marcus arranged for him to volunteer at a community center that provided meals for homeless LGBTQ youth. He had to check in with Marcus twice a week, either in person or by phone. He couldn't leave Los Angeles County without permission. He had to attend all his immigration hearings and meet with the pro bono attorney Marcus had connected him with. And every Wednesday at 2 p.m., Marcus came to the apartment to review his case. The first few visits were professional. Marcus would sit at Adrian's tiny kitchen table with his laptop and his files, asking questions about Adrian's life in Manila, documenting instances of discrimination, building the narrative that would support his asylum claim. Adrian would answer carefully, aware that every word was being recorded, every detail scrutinized. But by the 4th week, something had shifted. It started small. Marcus brought coffee, a latte for Adrian, black for himself. They discovered they both loved Baldwin and Lorca and Ocean Vuong. Marcus mentioned he'd grown up in Echo Park just a few miles from where Adrian was living now. Adrian admitted he'd never been to the beach even though he'd lived in LA for 6 months. Never, Marcus looked genuinely shocked. I was too scared to go too far from my apartment, Adrian admitted. I kept thinking ice would be everywhere, that if I drew any attention to myself I'd get caught. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he closed his laptop. Come on, he said. What? We're going to the beach. But my supervision. I'm your supervising officer, Marcus said with a slight smile. I'm supervising you at the beach. They took Marcus's car, an old Honda with a crack in the windshield and a backseat full of case files. They drove west on the 10, past Koreatown and Mid-City and Culver City until suddenly the ocean appeared, vast and glittering under the late afternoon sun. Santa Monica was crowded with tourists and street performers, so Marcus drove further north to a quieter stretch near Topanga. They parked and walked down to the sand, and Adrian took off his shoes and felt the Pacific Ocean for the first time. It's cold, he said, laughing as a wave rushed over his feet. It's always cold, Marcus said. This is LA, not the Caribbean. They walked along the shoreline as the sun began to set, turning the sky orange and pink and purple. Adrian kept sneaking glances at Marcus, at the way the wind ruffled his dark hair, at the relaxed set of his shoulders. He looked different outside the black room, outside the bureaucracy and paperwork. He looked like himself. Can I ask you something? Adrian said. Sure. Why do you do this? The immigration work, I mean. You could have any job you wanted. Marcus picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. My mother died 3 years ago, he said. Cancer. By then, she'd been a citizen for 20 years, but she always told me she never forgot what it felt like to wait, to not know if you'd be allowed to stay, if your family would be torn apart. She made me promise I'd help people the way people helped her. I'm sorry about your mother, Adrian said softly. Me too, Marcus threw the stone into the waves. She would have liked you, I think. She had a soft spot for stubborn romantics. Is that what I am? Marcus turned to look at him, and there was something in his expression that made Adrian's breath catch. Isn't it? You gave up everything for the chance to be yourself. That's pretty romantic. They stood there as the sun sank lower, and Adrian realized with a jolt that he wanted to kiss this man. Wanted it with an intensity that frightened him. But Marcus was his supervising officer. Marcus held his future in his hands, and Adrian had already risked too much. We should head back, Marcus said, breaking the moment. I have another appointment at 7. They drove back to Koreatown in comfortable silence, and when Marcus dropped him off, Adrian watched the taillights disappear down the street and felt more alone than he had in weeks. Over the next 2 months, Adrian's life settled into a rhythm. He volunteered at the community center 4 days a week, serving meals and listening to stories from kids who'd been kicked out or run away, who slept on friends' couches or in shelters or on the street. Their resilience humbled him. He met with his attorney, a fierce woman named Rosa who'd been fighting immigration cases for 20 years. She was building his asylum application methodically, gathering declarations from LGBTQ activists in the Philippines, documenting the country's discrimination laws, showing that Adrian had a well-founded fear of persecution. It's not a sure thing, Rosa told him bluntly, but it's stronger than most cases I see. You have education, you have documentation, and you have Marcus going to bat for you. That matters. And every Wednesday, Marcus came to the apartment. They'd long since stopped pretending the visits were purely professional. They'd talk for hours about books and music in their childhoods, about coming out and family and the weight of other people's expectations. Marcus told him about his ex-boyfriend, a lawyer who'd wanted Marcus to quit immigration work and join a corporate firm. Adrian told him about the guy in Manila, the one his father had found messages from, who'd cut off all contact the moment Adrian's family found out. People are scared, Marcus said, scared of being associated with something their families don't accept. Were you scared, Adrian asked, when you came out? Marcus considered this. Terrified, but more than that, I was tired of hiding, tired of lying, tired of being half a person. He met Adrian's eyes. Sound familiar? Very. One Wednesday in April, Marcus arrived at the apartment looking troubled. Adrian knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? Adrian asked. Marcus set down his laptop and rubbed his face. There's an issue with your case. The pilot program is being reviewed by the administration. There's a chance it could be shut down. Adrian felt cold. What does that mean for me? It means we need to accelerate your asylum application. Rosa's going to file within the next month and will request that you be allowed to stay pending the hearing. But Adrian, Marcus looked at him seriously. If the program shuts down before your hearing, you could be taken into custody, actual detention, not just supervision. How long would detention be? Could be weeks, could be months. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm going to fight like hell to prevent that, but I need you to be prepared for the possibility. Adrian sat down heavily on his bed. The thought of detention, of being locked up, of losing even this small freedom he'd carved out, was suffocating. Hey, Marcus moved to sit beside him. We're not there yet. I've handled cases like this before and I know how to navigate the system. You're not alone in this. Adrian looked at him, at this man who'd shown him more kindness than he deserved, who'd given him a chance when he had none. And before he could stop himself, before he could think about the consequences, Adrian leaned forward and kissed him. For a moment, Marcus froze. Then he was kissing back, his hand coming up to cup Adrian's jaw, and Adrian felt like he was falling and flying at the same time. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus's eyes were dark and conflicted. We can't, Marcus said. Adrian, I'm your supervising officer. This crosses every ethical line there is. I know, Adrian said. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. I wanted to, Marcus interrupted. God, I've wanted to since that first day in the black room, but if anyone finds out, it could destroy your case. They could accuse me of impropriety, of compromising the supervision. They could use it as grounds to deny your asylum. Adrian felt shame wash over him. You're right, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. Marcus stood up, running his hands through his hair. I should go, I'll see you next week. Marcus. But he was already at the door, already leaving, and Adrian was alone again with the taste of Marcus still on his lips and the certainty that he'd just made a terrible mistake. Marcus didn't come the following Wednesday. Instead, Adrian got an email. Something came up at work. Let's reschedule for Friday. Friday became the following Monday. Monday became a phone check-in instead of a visit. Suddenly, the comfortable rhythm they'd established was broken, replaced by professional distance and careful boundaries. Adrian knew it was his fault. He'd crossed a line and Marcus was protecting both of them by pulling back. It was the right thing to do, the smart thing. It also hurt more than Adrian wanted to admit. He threw himself into volunteering at the community center. There was a kid named Danny, 17 and recently kicked out by his evangelical parents, who reminded Adrian of himself at that age. Danny was angry and scared and trying so hard to be tough. My mom said she'd rather have a dead son than a gay son, Danny told Adrian one afternoon as they cleaned up after lunch service. How do you come back from that? Adrian thought about his own mother, about her tears and her prayers and her conviction that loving him meant trying to change him. I don't know if you do, Adrian said honestly, but you can build a new family, people who see you for who you are. Is that what you did? Adrian thought about Marcus, about Rosa, about the other volunteers at the center who'd welcomed him without question. I'm trying to, he said. In May, Rosa filed Adrian's asylum application. It was 150 pages of documentation, declarations, and evidence. Rosa was cautiously optimistic. We have a hearing date in July, she told him. That's fast, which is good. The judge is fair, which is also good. But Adrian, I need you to understand, even with everything we have, this could go either way. I understand, Adrian said. What he didn't say was that he was having trouble imagining a future at all. Whether he won or lost, everything would change. And the person he wanted to talk to about it, the person whose opinion mattered most, was maintaining professional distance and communicating primarily through email. Then in early June, Marcus called. Can you meet me somewhere? Marcus asked. Not the apartment, somewhere else. They met at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, the same neighborhood where Adrian had worked at the bookstore before he was caught. It was a sunny afternoon and the place was crowded with freelancers on laptops and students studying for exams. Marcus looked tired, he'd lost weight and there were shadows under his eyes. Are you okay? Adrian asked as they sat down with their coffees. I need to tell you something, Marcus said. The pilot program is being shut down. As of July 1st, all cases will be transferred to standard detention protocols. Adrian felt the world tilt. My hearing is July 15th. I know, which means you have 2 weeks before the changeover. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. Adrian, I've been trying to find alternatives. I've talked to everyone I know, pulled every string I have. There's one option, but it's complicated. Tell me. There's a small nonprofit that provides housing for asylum seekers who are at risk of detention. It's run by a coalition of immigrant rights groups, and they have connections with certain sympathetic judges. If you moved into their housing before July 1st, it would show the judge that you're part of a structured support system. It might be enough to keep you out of detention pending your hearing. Okay, Adrian said, what's the complication? Marcus was quiet for a moment. The complication is that I wouldn't be your supervising officer anymore. You'd be transferred to someone else. I wouldn't be able to work on your case. Adrian felt something inside him crack. Why? Because I've been flagged, Marcus said quietly. Someone filed a complaint about me claiming I'm too personally involved in your case. They're reviewing my conduct. If I stay on as your supervisor, it gives them ammunition to question my professional judgment and by extension to question your case. Who filed the complaint? I don't know, it was anonymous. Marcus's hands tightened around his coffee cup. But Adrian, even without the complaint, I should have recused myself weeks ago, after what happened in your apartment. I haven't been objective about your case for a long time. Adrian felt anger rise in him. So that's it, you just walk away. I'm not walking away, I'm trying to protect you. Marcus met his eyes and Adrian saw the pain there. If I stay involved and they find out about my feelings for you, it could sink your entire asylum claim. Is that what you want? No, Adrian said quietly, but I don't want to lose you either. You're not losing me, we have to do this the right way. You have to focus on your hearing, on building the strongest case possible, and I can't be a distraction. They sat in silence for a moment and Adrian realized this was goodbye. Not forever maybe, but for now, for the next crucial weeks when Adrian's entire future would be decided. The housing program, Adrian said, when would I need to move? This week, I'll help you pack and I'll make sure the transition goes smoothly. Your new supervisor is named Jennifer, she's good, I've worked with her before, you'll be okay. Will you be at the hearing? Adrian asked. Marcus hesitated. I shouldn't, it might raise questions. Please, Adrian said, even if you're just in the gallery, even if we can't talk, please be there. Marcus reached across the table and took Adrian's hand just for a moment. I'll be there, he said. The nonprofit housing was in Highland Park, a converted house with 6 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms shared by 8 asylum seekers from 6 different countries. Adrian's roommate was a transgender woman from Honduras named Sophia who'd fled gang violence and who spent her evenings teaching herself English from YouTube videos. Jennifer, his new supervisor, was competent and kind but not Marcus. Their meetings were purely professional, no coffee, no long conversations, no moments of connection that felt like coming home. Adrian threw himself into preparing for the hearing. Rosa coached him on testimony, on how to answer questions clearly and directly, on what details the judge would care about. They did practice runs where Rosa played the government attorney, firing hostile questions at Adrian about why he hadn't come out earlier, why his family's disapproval constituted persecution, why he couldn't just be discreet about his sexuality. It's going to be hard, Rosa warned him. They're going to try to poke holes in your story, but remember, you're not on trial for being gay, you're seeking protection because your country won't protect you. Keep that distinction clear. The days before the hearing blurred together. Adrian barely slept, running through testimony in his head, imagining every possible question and answer. Sophia brought him tea and sat with him in the evenings, telling him about her own hearing, which was still months away. The waiting is the worst part, Sophia said in halting English. You think maybe this time they will see you as human, not just a case number. Did they? Adrian asked. See you as human. Sophia smiled sadly, still waiting to find out. The night before the hearing, Adrian couldn't sleep at all. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Marcus. They hadn't spoken since the coffee shop, though Adrian had written him a dozen emails he never sent. What would he say? Thank you for saving me, I'm falling in love with you, I'm terrified I'll never see you again. At 6 a.m. he gave up on sleep and took a shower. He dressed in the suit Rosa had helped him pick out: navy, conservative, respectable. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. Rosa picked him up at 8 a.m. The hearing was at the immigration court downtown in a building that looked like any other government office. They went through security, signed in, and sat in the waiting area with dozens of other people, families with small children, young men traveling alone, women clutching folders of documents. "Remember," Rosa said, "answer the questions directly, don't elaborate unless asked, and Adrian, tell the truth. The judge can tell when you're holding back." At 9:30 they were called into the courtroom. It was smaller than Adrian expected, more like a conference room than a proper court. The judge was a middle-aged white woman with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The government attorney was a young man who looked fresh out of law school. There was a court reporter, a translator Adrian didn't need, and in the gallery, Marcus. He was sitting in the back row wearing a dark suit, his expression carefully neutral. But when Adrian met his eyes, Marcus gave the smallest nod and Adrian felt something settle in his chest. He wasn't alone. The hearing began. Rosa presented their case methodically: the documentation of anti-LGBTQ discrimination in the Philippines, the statements from activists and human rights organizations, the evidence of Adrian's own experiences with his family and community. She walked the judge through the asylum standard, that Adrian had a well-founded fear of persecution based on membership in a particular social group. Then it was the government attorney's turn. "Mr. Reyes," he said, standing up, "you entered the United States on a tourist visa, correct?" "Yes," Adrian said. "And you knew that visa was only good for 6 months?" "Yes." "But you stayed for a year, you worked illegally. You had no intention of leaving when your visa expired, did you?" "No," Adrian admitted, "I didn't." "So you knowingly violated immigration law?" "Yes." The attorney paused, letting that hang in the air. "And now you're asking us to believe that you couldn't simply return to the Philippines and live discreetly, that you face persecution?" "I'm not asking to live discreetly," Adrian said, feeling anger rise. "I'm asking to live honestly, and in the Philippines that's not possible for me." "Why not? You have a wealthy family, resources, education. Many gay people in the Philippines live perfectly normal lives." "If they hide," Adrian said, "if they lie to their families, their coworkers, their communities, if they accept that they'll never be full people in their own country." He looked directly at the judge. "I tried that for 27 years, it almost killed me." The government attorney shuffled his papers. "Let's talk about your family. They didn't physically harm you, did they?" "No." "They didn't threaten you with violence?" "Not explicitly." "They provided you with therapy, with religious counseling. They were trying to help you, weren't they?" Adrian felt something inside him snap. "They were trying to erase me," he said, his voice shaking. "They sent me to priests who told me I was possessed, to therapists who used techniques that have been condemned as torture by medical organizations. They told me that the core of who I am was a disease that needed to be cured. And when I wouldn't be cured, when I couldn't change something fundamental about myself, they looked at me like I was a stranger, like I had betrayed them by existing." The courtroom was very quiet. "That might not be violence by your definition," Adrian continued, "but it's persecution by mine, and if I go back it will continue. My father will find me a wife. He'll put me in a position at his company where I'm visible, where I'm expected to be an example. And I'll spend every day lying about who I am, suffocating under the weight of everyone's expectations until there's nothing left of me at all." He was crying now, he realized. Tears were streaming down his face and he didn't care. Let them see, let them understand what this cost. "And I know I broke the law by staying," Adrian said. "I know I should have left when my visa expired. But I also know that the 6 months I spent in Los Angeles, being myself, being honest, being seen, those were the only 6 months of my entire life where I wasn't drowning. And I couldn't go back to drowning, I couldn't." The judge was watching him carefully, her expression unreadable. The government attorney sat down. "No further questions," he said quietly. Rosa stood. "Your Honor, the United States has a proud tradition of providing protection to people who face persecution in their home countries. Adrian Reyes is asking for nothing more than the chance to live with dignity, to exist without fear. He's contributed to his community through volunteer work. He's followed the conditions of his supervision. He's done everything right except for the initial mistake of overstaying, a mistake born not of criminal intent but of desperation." The judge removed her glasses and cleaned them slowly. "I've heard the testimony," she said. "I've reviewed the evidence. This is a difficult case. Mr. Reyes, you did violate immigration law and that weighs against you. However, the testimony regarding your experiences in the Philippines, combined with the documented evidence of discrimination against LGBTQ individuals in that country, does establish a credible fear of persecution. Adrian held his breath. I'm going to take this under advisement, the judge said. I'll issue a written decision within 30 days. In the meantime, Mr. Reyes, you're to remain under supervision at your current housing. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down and it was over. Adrian stood on shaky legs. Rosa was hugging him, saying something about how well he'd done, how the judge seemed sympathetic. But Adrian was looking at the gallery where Marcus was still sitting, and the expression on Marcus's face was one Adrian had never seen before, pride and pain and something deeper, something Adrian was afraid to name. Marcus stood and walked toward the exit. For a moment, Adrian thought he would leave without a word, but at the door, Marcus turned back. Their eyes met across the courtroom and Marcus mouthed two words, "I'm proud." Then he was gone. 30 days, that's what the judge had said. 30 days for a decision that would determine the rest of Adrian's life. He went back to the nonprofit housing and threw up in the bathroom. Sophia found him there and sat with him on the tile floor, rubbing his back and murmuring reassurances in Spanish that Adrian didn't understand but felt in his bones. "You were brave today," Sophia told him. "I heard from Jennifer, she said you told them the truth even when it hurt." "I don't feel brave," Adrian said. "I feel like I'm breaking apart." "That's what brave is," Sophia said, "doing the hard thing even when you're breaking." The days crawled by. Adrian kept volunteering at the community center, kept meeting with Jennifer, kept living his life in this strange limbo between hope and despair. Danny, the 17-year-old, got placed in a foster home with a gay couple in Pasadena. He came back to the center to say goodbye, and he hugged Adrian so hard Adrian's ribs hurt. "You helped me," Danny said. "When I thought no one gave a shit, you did." "You helped me too," Adrian said honestly. "You reminded me why I'm fighting." 2 weeks passed, then 3. Adrian checked his email obsessively, called Rosa's office daily, and jumped every time his phone rang. The waiting was a special kind of torture, every moment stretched thin with possibility and dread. And then on day 28, Rosa called. "Adrian," she said, "the decision came early, we need to meet." Adrian's hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the phone. Did I?" "In person," Rosa said. "Can you come to my office?" The drive from Highland Park to Rosa's office in downtown LA took 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Sophia came with him, holding his hand in the back of the Uber, praying quietly in Spanish. Rosa's office was small and cluttered, every surface covered with case files and law books. She stood when they entered and her expression was carefully controlled. "Sit down," Rosa said. Adrian sat, Sophia remained standing, her hand on his shoulder. Rosa opened a folder and pulled out a document. "The judge issued her decision this morning. Adrian, you've been granted asylum." The world stopped. "What?" Adrian whispered. "You won. The judge found that you met the standard for persecution based on membership in a particular social group, in this case, gay men in the Philippines who face familial and societal rejection. She cited your testimony as credible and compelling, and she noted that the evidence supported your claim that you cannot live safely or openly in your home country." Rosa's professional composure cracked and she smiled. "Adrian, you get to stay." Adrian couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, the words didn't seem real. Sophia was crying, hugging him from behind. Rosa came around the desk and handed him the decision, pages and pages of legal language that all added up to one impossible, miraculous truth: he was safe. He could stay, he could build a life here. "What happens now?" Adrian managed to ask. "Now you apply for a work permit, which you should get within a few months. You'll be eligible for a green card in a year. You can travel, you can work legally, you can..." Rosa paused. "You can live, Adrian, really live." Adrian looked down at the decision in his hands, at the judge's signature at the bottom, and he started to cry. Not the desperate tears of the hearing, but something deeper, relief and grief and joy all tangled together. He was crying for the boy he'd been in Manila, suffocating in silence. He was crying for his mother, who might never understand. He was crying for every moment of the past year when he'd been so sure this would end in deportation. And he was crying because the person he wanted to tell first, the person who'd made all of this possible, wasn't there. "Can I?" Adrian's voice broke. "Can I tell Marcus?" "Is that allowed now?" Rosa's expression softened. Adrian, you're not under supervision anymore, you can tell whoever you want. Adrian didn't have Marcus's personal number. All their communication had gone through official channels, office phones, government email addresses. But he had Marcus's work email and he sent a message before he could talk himself out of it. I won, I got asylum, I wanted you to know, thank you for everything, Adrian. He hit send and stared at his phone as if Marcus might respond immediately, but hours passed and there was nothing. That night, back at the nonprofit housing, Sophia organized an impromptu celebration. The other residents gathered in the kitchen with a cake from the grocery store and a bottle of cheap champagne someone had been saving. They toasted Adrian in 6 different languages, and for a little while, Adrian let himself feel purely happy. But later, lying in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about Marcus, about the distance that had opened between them, about the kiss in his apartment that had changed everything, about the way Marcus had looked at him in the courtroom like he was seeing something precious and fragile that might break. Adrian's phone buzzed, his heart leaped. But it wasn't Marcus, it was an email from an address he didn't recognize, marcusdpersonal@gmail.com. The subject line was empty. Adrian opened it with shaking hands. Adrian asterisk. I'm so proud of you, I knew you could do this, but watching you fight for yourself, watching you stand up in that courtroom and tell your truth, it was one of the most courageous things I've ever witnessed. I want to see you, I want to celebrate with you, but I also want to be careful about how we do this. Your case is closed, but mine is still under review. The complaint against me is still being investigated, and until it's resolved, I need to be cautious about any contact between us that could be misconstrued. I know that's not fair to you, you've just won your freedom and here I am asking you to wait again. But I need you to understand everything I've done, every boundary I've set has been to protect you, to make sure nothing I did could jeopardize your case. And now that your case is won, now that you're safe, I can finally tell you what I've wanted to say for months. I'm in love with you. I think I have been since that first day in the black room when you looked at me with those terrified eyes and told me about Manila. I fell in love with your courage and your kindness and the way you care about people like Danny and Sophia. I fell in love with the way you see the world, the way you fight for beauty and truth even when it costs you everything. The investigation into my conduct should be resolved in the next few weeks. If it goes in my favor, and I think it will since I followed every protocol even when it killed me, then I'm free. Free to see you not as a case file but as a person. Free to take you to dinner, to walk on the beach, to kiss you the way I wanted to that night in your apartment. If you'll still have me. Wait for me, Adrian, just a little longer, I promise it will be worth it. Yours, Marcus. Adrian read the email 3 times, his heart pounding so hard he thought he might pass out. Marcus loved him. Marcus had loved him for months, had been holding back for Adrian's sake, had put Adrian's safety above everything else. Adrian hit reply and typed with trembling fingers. Marcus asterisk. I'll wait. I've been waiting my whole life to be seen the way you see me. I can wait a few more weeks. I love you too, I think I have since the beach when you showed me that LA could be beautiful, not just scary, maybe even before that. Take care of yourself, finish your investigation, and then come find me. I'll be here. Adrian. He sent the email and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling with a smile that wouldn't quit. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the future looked bright. The next 3 weeks were strange. Adrian moved out of the nonprofit housing and into a studio apartment in Los Feliz, small but his own, paid for with money he'd been saving and a small grant for asylum recipients that Rosa had helped him apply for. He filed for his work permit and started applying for jobs, real jobs with benefits and contracts. Danny visited him along with some of the other kids from the community center. They ordered pizza and watched movies, and Danny told Adrian about his new school, his new foster parents who let him be himself. They're good people, Danny said, like you. I'm not that good, Adrian said. Yeah, you are, Danny insisted. You didn't have to help me, you were dealing with your own shit and you still showed up. Adrian thought about Marcus, about how he'd shown up for Adrian when he didn't have to. About how the best people he'd met in LA were the ones who helped without expecting anything in return. Sophia's hearing came and went. She was granted asylum too, and she and Adrian celebrated by going to Disneyland, something neither of them had ever done. They rode Space Mountain 3 times and ate churros until they felt sick, and Sophia took 100 photos in front of the castle. I never thought I would be here, Sophia said, her eyes bright. Never thought I would be safe enough to be silly to just be happy for a day. Me neither, Adrian admitted. But through it all, Adrian was waiting for news from Marcus, waiting for the investigation to end, waiting to find out if they'd get their chance. Marcus sent occasional emails, brief, careful updates. The investigation was ongoing. They were interviewing people, reviewing his case files, looking for any evidence of misconduct. Marcus was confident he'd followed every rule, but he also knew that sometimes the system didn't care about rules, only appearances. I want to see you so badly it hurts, Marcus wrote in one email. I want to hear about your apartment and your job interviews and everything you're building, but I also need to make sure that when we're finally together there's nothing hanging over us. No questions, no doubts. Soon Adrian wrote back, we've waited this long, we can wait a little longer. But it was hard to be so close to happiness and still have it just out of reach. In early September, 5 weeks after the asylum decision, Rosa called. Adrian, I just heard from a colleague who works with immigration enforcement. Marcus's investigation has been resolved. Adrian's breath caught, and he's been cleared. They found no evidence of misconduct. Apparently, several other officers came forward to testify on his behalf, including his supervisor. They all said Marcus handled your case with complete professionalism. So he's okay. He's fine, better than fine. They're actually recommending him for a promotion. Rosa paused. I thought you'd want to know. Adrian hung up and immediately checked his email. Nothing new from Marcus. He paced his tiny apartment, his mind racing. Should he reach out? Should he wait for Marcus to contact him? How long would? His phone rang, unknown number. Hello, Adrian answered. It's me, Marcus's voice, warm and real and close. I'm downstairs, can I come up? Adrian's heart stopped. You're what? I'm outside your building. The investigation closed this morning and I got in my car and just drove here. I couldn't wait another day. Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. Can I see you? Yes, Adrian breathed. Yes, come up, 3rd floor, apartment 3C. He hung up and stared at his apartment with sudden panic. It was a mess, books everywhere, dishes in the sink, laundry on the couch. He tried to straighten up, then gave up. Marcus didn't care about the mess. A knock at the door. Adrian opened it and there was Marcus. Not in his work clothes but in jeans and a soft blue shirt, his hair slightly messy, his eyes bright with barely contained emotion. Hi, Marcus said. Hi, Adrian whispered. They stood there for a moment, drinking each other in. It had been 2 months since they'd been in the same room, 2 months of emails and waiting and wanting. Can I? Marcus started. Adrian didn't let him finish. He pulled Marcus inside, closed the door and kissed him. It was different from the kiss in his old apartment. That had been desperate and stolen, shadowed by fear and consequences. This was free, this was theirs. Marcus kissed him back with a hunger that made Adrian's knees weak. His hands came up to cup Adrian's face, gentle and sure, and Adrian melted into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against Adrian's. I've wanted to do that for so long, Marcus murmured. Me too, Adrian said. I've wanted everything, all of it. Marcus smiled, that soft smile Adrian had fallen in love with. Then let me take you to dinner first, let me do this right. You don't have to. I want to, Marcus insisted. I want to take you on a proper date. I want to walk down the street with you and hold your hand and not worry about who sees. I want to show you off. Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. Okay, he said, take me to dinner. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Silver Lake, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Marcus ordered wine and they toasted to freedom, to new beginnings, to the future that stretched out before them bright with possibility. Over pasta and bread, they talked about everything they'd missed. Adrian told Marcus about his apartment, about job interviews, about Sophia's asylum victory. Marcus told him about the investigation, about how scared he'd been, that his feelings for Adrian had clouded his judgment, that he'd failed Adrian somehow. You didn't fail me, Adrian said firmly. You saved me, in every way a person can be saved. Marcus reached across the table and took his hand. You saved yourself, Adrian. I gave you a chance, you did the rest. We saved each other, Adrian said. How about that? Marcus smiled. I can live with that. After dinner, they walked through the neighborhood. The night was warm and the streets were alive with people spilling out of bars and restaurants. Marcus held Adrian's hand and nobody stared, nobody cared. They were just two men in love walking through the city. They ended up at a viewpoint overlooking the city. The lights of Los Angeles spread out below them like a blanket of stars. Adrian leaned against Marcus, feeling his warmth, his solidity. I used to be so scared of this city, Adrian said quietly. When I first got here, every siren made me think it was ICE coming for me, every knock on the door, every stranger's glance. I was so terrified of being caught that I couldn't see any of the beauty. And now, Marcus asked. Now I see it, Adrian said. The beauty, the possibility, all the lives being lived down there, all the people building homes and families and futures. I get to be one of them now. Marcus turned to look at him, and in the dim light his eyes were dark and intense. I want to be part of your future, Adrian, if you'll let me. I want that too, Adrian said, more than anything. Marcus kissed him again, soft and sweet, and Adrian thought about how far he'd come. From that black room where he'd been so certain everything was over to this moment, this kiss, this love. Take me home, Adrian whispered against Marcus's lips. Marcus pulled back slightly, searching his eyes. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Adrian said. They drove back to Adrian's apartment in comfortable silence, Marcus's hand resting on Adrian's thigh, Adrian's fingers intertwined with his. The tension between them was electric but not rushed. They had time now, all the time in the world. Inside the apartment, Adrian turned on a lamp, casting everything in warm light. Marcus looked around, taking in the books stacked on every surface, the photographs Adrian had started collecting, one of him and Sophia at Disneyland, one of Danny and his foster parents, one of the community center volunteers. You've built a life here, Marcus said softly. I'm building one, Adrian corrected. It's still under construction. Marcus turned to face him. Can I be part of the construction? Instead of answering with words, Adrian kissed him. And this time there was no interruption, no reason to stop. Marcus's hands slid under Adrian's shirt, warm against his skin, and Adrian gasped into his mouth. They made their way to the bed, shedding clothes between kisses. Marcus was gentle, reverent, taking his time to learn Adrian's body like he'd learned his story, with patience and care and complete attention. When they finally came together, Adrian felt like he was shattering and becoming whole at the same time. Afterwards, they lay tangled in sheets, Adrian's head on Marcus's chest, listening to his heartbeat. I love you, Marcus said into the darkness. I know I said it in the email, but I need you to hear me say it. I love you, Adrian Reyes. I love you too, Adrian said. Marcus Delgado, immigration officer and unlikely romantic. Marcus laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. Unlikely. You work in bureaucracy, Adrian teased. That's not typically associated with grand romantic gestures. I drove across LA the moment I was cleared to see you. I kissed you in a viewpoint overlooking the city. I just made love to you like you're the most precious thing in the world, which you are. I'd say I'm plenty romantic. Adrian lifted his head to look at him. You really think I'm precious? Marcus's expression grew serious. I think you're brave and kind and beautiful. I think you're one of the best people I've ever met. And I think I want to spend every day for the foreseeable future proving to you that you deserve all the love and happiness in the world. Adrian felt tears slip down his cheeks. I'm not used to this, he admitted, being loved for who I am, not despite who I am, but because of it. You better get used to it, Marcus said, wiping away Adrian's tears with his thumb. Because I'm not going anywhere. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, Adrian didn't have nightmares. He dreamed of beaches and open skis and a future that felt within reach. The next few months were a whirlwind. Adrian got his work permit and landed a job at a nonprofit that provided legal services to immigrants. He couldn't be a lawyer without a law degree, but he could be a case manager, helping people navigate the system that had almost broken him. Rosa recommended him personally, and his first day she gave him a hug and told him she was proud. Marcus got his promotion, a supervisory role that meant more paperwork but also more influence. He could shape how his office handled LGBTQ asylum cases, could train other officers in sensitivity and proper protocols. It was exactly the kind of work he'd always wanted to do. They settled into a rhythm. Marcus still had his apartment in Echo Park and Adrian had his studio in Los Feliz, but they spent most nights together. They cooked meals in whichever kitchen was closer, learned each other's routines, figured out how to build a life together. But it wasn't always easy. One night in November, Adrian got a call from his sister in Manila. He almost didn't answer, they hadn't spoken since he'd left, but something made him pick up. Adrian, her voice was small, uncertain. "It's Maria." "I know," Adrian said, his heart was pounding. "Is everything okay? Is someone hurt?" "No, nothing like that, she paused. "I wanted to talk to you. I heard about your asylum case, about what you said in court. Someone posted about it on social media and it got shared around. People were talking about it at the company." Adrian felt cold. "What did they say?" "Some people were awful, they called you names, said you were betraying the family. But Adrian, some people said you were brave, that they understood, that they wished they could do the same." Adrian sat down heavily on his couch. Marcus, who'd been reading in the bedroom, appeared in the doorway, concern on his face. Adrian waved him over. "Maria, why are you calling?" Adrian asked. "Because I'm sorry," she said, and he could hear tears in her voice. "I'm sorry I stopped talking to you. I was scared of what people would think, scared of disappointing Mama and Papa. But Adrian, you're my brother and I miss you, and I'm sorry it took me 2 years to say that." Adrian was crying now. Marcus sat beside him and took his free hand, squeezing gently. "I miss you too," Adrian said, "so much. Can we try again? Can I call you sometimes, talk to you? I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but—" "Yes," Adrian interrupted. "Yes, you can call me. Maria, you're my sister. I want you in my life." They talked for an hour. Maria told him about her life. She was engaged now, working at the company, still living at home. She asked about LA, about his life, and Adrian told her everything. About his job, about the apartment, about Marcus. "You have a boyfriend?" Maria sounded genuinely happy. "What's he like?" "He's everything," Adrian said, looking at Marcus. "He's kind and smart and he makes me feel safe. He's the reason I got to stay here." "I'm glad," Maria said. "I'm glad you found someone who sees you, Adrian. You deserve that." After they hung up, Adrian sat in silence for a moment, processing. Marcus wrapped an arm around him. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "Yeah," Adrian said. "Yeah, I think I am. It's not everything. My parents still won't talk to me and Maria's scared to tell them she called, but it's something, it's a start." "It's more than a start," Marcus said, "it's hope." Yeah. But not everything was resolved so neatly. In December, the nonprofit housing where Adrian had stayed faced a funding crisis. They might have to close, which would leave 8 people without a safe place to live, including Sophia. Adrian was frantic. He called everyone he knew, reached out to donors, organized a fundraiser at the community center. Marcus helped, using his connections in the immigrant rights community to spread the word. The night of the fundraiser, Adrian stood in front of 50 people and told his story. Not the sanitized version he'd told at the hearing, but the full truth. He talked about the black room, about Marcus, about the terror and the hope and the impossible miracle of being allowed to stay. "I got lucky," Adrian said. "I had a good lawyer, a sympathetic judge, and people who fought for me, but there are thousands of people who don't get that luck, who get deported back to countries where they can't live safely, who get lost in detention for months or years, who give up because the system is designed to break them." He gestured to Sophia, who stood in the back of the room. "Sophia is one of the bravest people I know. She escaped gang violence, crossed borders, survived things I can't even imagine, and now she's building a life here, learning English, going to community college. She deserves safety. She deserves a chance. They all do." By the end of the night, they'd raised enough to keep the nonprofit housing open for another year. People hugged Adrian, thanked him, told him he'd made a difference. But Adrian knew the truth, it was a temporary victory. There would always be more cases, more people in need, more fights to win. "You can't save everyone," Marcus told him that night as they lay in bed. "I know," Adrian said, "but I can try to save someone. That has to count for something." Marcus kissed his temple, it counts for everything. Christmas came and Adrian spent it with Marcus's family. His father had come around years ago after his initial rejection, and now he welcomed Adrian with open arms. Marcus's sister brought her husband and their 2 kids, and they ate tamales and played board games and watched the children tear through wrapping paper. It was loud and chaotic and warm, and Adrian felt a pang of loss for his own family. But then Marcus's father pulled him aside and said, "Your family now, you know. Marcus is happier than I've seen him in years, and that's because of you." "He makes me happy too," Adrian said. "Good," Marcus's father said, "you both deserve it." In January, a year after Adrian's asylum hearing, Rosa called him into her office. "It's time to file for your green card," she said. "You've had asylum status for a year, which means you're eligible for permanent residency." The process was extensive but straightforward, more paperwork, more documentation, more waiting, but this time Adrian wasn't afraid. He had Rosa, he had Marcus, he had a whole community of people who'd shown him that he belonged. In March, he got his green card in the mail. He stared at the little plastic card with his photo on it, the words "permanent resident" in official government typeface, and he felt a sense of wholeness he'd never experienced before. That night, he and Marcus celebrated at the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. Over wine and pasta, Marcus was unusually quiet. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked. "Nothing's wrong," Marcus said. He reached across the table and took Adrian's hand. "I've been thinking about something, about us, about the future." Adrian's heart started to race. "Okay. We've been together for almost a year now, we spend every night together, we have keys to each other's apartments, we've met each other's families." Marcus paused. "I think it's time we stop pretending we live separately and actually move in together." Adrian felt a rush of relief and joy. "You want to live together? I want to wake up next to you every morning without having to drive across town. I want to build a home with you, not just stay in your apartment or mine. I want—" Marcus stopped, then started again. "Adrian, I want a life with you, a real life with shared bills and furniture we pick out together and arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want all of it." "Yes," Adrian said immediately. "Yes, I want that too." Marcus grinned, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. "Yeah. Yeah," Adrian said, "let's find an apartment, let's build a home." They spent the next month apartment hunting, looking at places in neighborhoods they both loved: Highland Park, Echo Park, Silver Lake. They finally found a 2-bedroom in Mount Washington with big windows and a view of downtown, close enough to both their jobs and with room for Adrian's books and Marcus's ever-growing collection of case files. Moving in together was chaotic. They had twice as much stuff as they needed and nowhere to put it all. They argued about whether to keep Adrian's lumpy couch, no, and Marcus's ancient coffee maker, yes. They spent a weekend building IKEA furniture and nearly broke up over the assembly instructions for a bookshelf. But they also discovered rhythms. Marcus liked to make coffee in the morning while Adrian was still half asleep. Adrian cooked dinner while Marcus decompressed from work. They read together on the couch, legs tangled in comfortable silence. They hosted dinners for friends, watched Sophia graduate from community college, celebrated when Danny got accepted to UCLA. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes about money, about how much time Marcus spent at work, about Adrian's tendency to take on too many volunteer commitments, but they always came back to each other, always talked it through, always remembered what they'd overcome to be together. 2 years after Adrian's asylum hearing, he became eligible to apply for citizenship. Rosa walked him through the process: the civics test, the English test, the interview. Adrian studied American history with the same intensity he'd once studied for his asylum case, determined to prove he belonged. The citizenship ceremony was held in the same building where his asylum hearing had taken place, but in a different room, a large hall with flags and rows of chairs. There were 100 other people becoming citizens that day, from dozens of countries, speaking dozens of languages. Marcus sat in the audience next to Sophia, who was also applying for citizenship. Rosa was there too, and Danny with his foster parents. Maria had sent a video message telling Adrian she was proud of him, that she loved him, that she hoped someday their parents would understand. When Adrian's name was called, he stood and took the oath of citizenship, his hand over his heart. And when he received his citizenship certificate, he looked out at the people who'd helped him get there and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Afterwards, they all went to dinner, a big, loud celebration at a Korean barbecue place in Koreatown. They ate and laughed and told stories, and at one point, Danny raised his glass and said, "To Adrian, who showed me it was possible to build a family out of people who actually give a shit." To Adrian, everyone echoed. That night, back in their apartment, Adrian and Marcus sat on their balcony looking out at the city lights. Adrian still had his citizenship certificate in his hands, kept taking it out to look at it, to make sure it was real. "You did it," Marcus said softly. "You're really, truly safe now. No one can take this away from you." "We did it," Adrian corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Marcus pulled him close. "I think you would have found a way. You're stubborn like that." "Maybe," Adrian conceded, "but it wouldn't have been the same." "Marcus, that first day in the black room, I was so sure everything was over. I thought I'd lost my chance, that I'd have to go back to being someone I wasn't, and then you walked in and gave me hope." "You gave me hope too," Marcus said. "I'd been doing this work for years and I believed in it, but I'd gotten cynical. I'd seen too many cases I couldn't win, too many people I couldn't help, but you reminded me why I started doing this. You reminded me that every case is a person, a life, a whole world of possibilities." Adrian kissed him, soft and deep. "I love you," he said. "I know I say it all the time, but I need you to know." "I know," Marcus interrupted gently. "I love you too, and I'm going to keep loving you tomorrow and the next day and all the days after that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Adrian thought about how far he'd come, from that terrified man in the black room to this moment, this love, this life. He thought about his father who still didn't speak to him, and his mother who sent money through Maria but couldn't bring herself to call. He thought about all the people still fighting for their chance, still waiting in black rooms of their own. "I want to do more," Adrian said suddenly. "At work, I help people navigate the system, but I want to do more than that. I want to change the system." Marcus turned to look at him. "What are you thinking?" "I don't know yet. Maybe go to law school, become an immigration attorney like Rosa. Maybe work in policy, try to change the laws that make it so hard for people like me to stay. Maybe just keep telling my story, keep showing people that we're human beings, not case files." Adrian paused. "I just know I can't be comfortable while other people are still suffering." "Then we'll figure it out together," Marcus said. "Whatever you want to do, I'm with you." Adrian leaned his head on Marcus's shoulder. "Even if it means more long nights and take-out dinners and me being stressed and cranky." "Especially then," Marcus said. "That's what love is, Adrian. It's choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Adrian stood in front of a classroom of 20 law students at UCLA, where he'd been invited as a guest lecturer for their immigration law seminar. At 35, he'd accomplished everything he dreamed of and more. He'd gone to law school at night while working full-time, passed the bar on his first try, and now worked alongside Rosa at her firm, taking on the most difficult asylum cases. "The thing about immigration law," Adrian told the students, "is that you're not just dealing with statutes and regulations. You're dealing with people's lives. Every case represents someone who's risking everything for the chance at safety, at dignity, at the right to be themselves." He told them about his own case. It had become somewhat famous in immigration law circles, cited in legal briefs and law review articles as an example of successful LGBTQ asylum. He told them about the black room, about the fear, about the moment the judge granted him asylum. "But here's what I want you to understand," Adrian said. "I was lucky. I had an excellent attorney. I had support from advocates and community members. I had someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Most asylum seekers don't have that. They're navigating a system designed to exclude them, and they're doing it alone." A student raised her hand. "How do we fix that?" Adrian smiled. "One case at a time, one person at a time. You show up, you fight, you refuse to let the system grind people down, and sometimes you change the law itself." He showed them slides about a recent case he and Rosa had won that set new precedent for family-based asylum claims. He talked about the coalition of attorneys and activists working to reform asylum procedures. He talked about the small victories and the ongoing battles. After class, several students came up to talk to him, to ask questions, to tell him about their own family's immigration stories. Adrian listened to each one, offered advice, encouraged them to keep fighting. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How'd the lecture go? Adrian smiled and typed back, good, coming home now, what do you want for dinner? Whatever you want to cook, I'll pick up wine. Home, Adrian still felt a thrill every time he thought that word. The apartment in Mount Washington had become a house in Highland Park, bought with 2 incomes and a mortgage and all the markers of permanence. They'd adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Justice who had 3 legs and an attitude problem. They hosted monthly dinners for a rotating group of friends, Sophia and her girlfriend Danny and his boyfriend, Rosa and her wife, other attorneys and activists and people they'd met along the way. Adrian's relationship with his family was still complicated. Maria visited once a year, secretly at first, but now with her husband and their daughter. His mother sent emails occasionally, stilted and formal but trying. His father had never reached out, and Adrian had made peace with that loss. You couldn't force people to love you the way you needed to be loved. But he'd built his own family. Marcus's family had fully embraced him. He was Uncle Adrian to Marcus's nieces and nephews. He had friends who knew him completely and loved him anyway. He had a dog who slept on his feet and a house full of books and a husband. Well, not officially, not yet. But tonight, if everything went according to plan, that would change. Adrian got home to find the house dark except for candles. Rose petals led from the front door through the living room to the backyard, where Marcus had set up their small patio with more candles and fairy lights. Marcus, Adrian called out, his heart starting to race. Marcus appeared from the kitchen wearing the soft blue shirt Adrian loved, the one that made his eyes look warm and deep. He was nervous. Adrian could tell there was a slight tremor in his hands, a catch in his breath. Hi, Marcus said. What's all this? Adrian asked, though he thought he might know. It's been 5 years, Marcus said. 5 years since that night in the black room when I first met you. 5 years since I started falling in love with you, even though I couldn't admit it. Even though every rule and regulation said I shouldn't. He took Adrian's hand and led him to the center of the patio, where Justice sat obediently, clearly bribed with treats, wearing a bow tie with a small box attached to his collar. You changed my life, Adrian, Marcus continued. You made me remember why I do this work. You made me believe in love again. You made me want to build something permanent, something real, something that would last. Marcus got down on one knee, and Adrian's vision blurred with tears. I know we can't get legally married, Marcus said. It was 2026, but there were still states fighting marriage equality, still battles to be won. But I don't care about legal technicalities. I care about you. I care about us. I care about waking up next to you for the rest of my life and knowing that we chose each other, that we fought for each other, that we built this together. He opened the box from Justice's collar, revealing 2 simple gold bands. Adrian Reyes, will you marry me? Will you be my husband in every way that matters? Adrian was crying openly now, not caring about dignity or composure. Yes, he said. Yes, of course, yes. Marcus stood and slid the ring onto Adrian's finger, then Adrian did the same for him. They kissed, soft and sweet and full of promise, while Justice barked his approval. I love you, Adrian whispered against Marcus's lips. I love you so much. I love you too, Marcus said, my husband. They held a ceremony 3 months later, not legally binding but real in every way that mattered. They stood in the backyard of their house surrounded by everyone they loved. Sophia officiated, reading a passage from Baldwin's Giovanni's room that made half the guests cry. Danny gave a speech about finding family in unexpected places. Rosa toasted to love that perseveres against all odds. Adrian's mother sent a card, just a card with a short note. I'm trying to understand. Please be patient with me. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't acceptance, but it was movement, it was hope. Maria came in person against their father's wishes. She hugged Adrian and told him, you deserve this, you deserve all the happiness in the world. When Adrian and Marcus exchanged their vows, Adrian looked into the eyes of the man who'd saved him in that black room and said, you gave me more than asylum. You gave me a home, not just a place to live but a sense of belonging. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You loved me when I'd forgotten what it meant to be loved. His voice broke, but he continued. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift. I promise to fight for people like we were, people who just need someone to see them, to believe in them, to give them a chance. I promise to love you with everything I am, every single day for as long as I live. Marcus was crying too, unashamed. Adrian, you told me once that I saved you, but the truth is we saved each other. You reminded me why I do this work, why fighting for justice matters, why every single case, every single person deserves to be fought for. He squeezed Adrian's hands. I promise to stand with you in every fight. I promise to be your home, your safe place, the person you can always come back to. I promise to love you not despite your past, not despite your struggles, but because of all of it. Because everything you've survived has made you who you are, and I love exactly who you are. They kissed as husbands, and their friends and chosen family cheered, and the California sun set golden over the backyard of the home they'd built together. Adrian eventually did go back to Manila. Not to stay, but to visit. Marcus came with him, holding his hand as they walked through the streets where Adrian had grown up feeling suffocated and afraid. They met Maria and her family at a restaurant, Neutral Territory. Adrian's mother came too, nervous and uncertain but present. She shook Marcus's hand and said, "Thank you for taking care of my son." "He takes care of me too," Marcus said gently. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. Adrian's father still refused to meet him. His mother still struggled with understanding. But there was contact now, tentative bridges being built. Maria's daughter called Adrian uncle and asked him about America with bright, curious eyes. On their last day in Manila, Adrian took Marcus to the church where he'd been sent for conversion therapy. It had been converted into a community center now, and Adrian stood outside looking at it. "I used to be so angry at this place," Adrian said. "Angry at everyone who tried to change me, to erase me, but now I just feel sad for everyone who couldn't escape, who spent their whole lives hiding." "You didn't just escape," Marcus said. "You thrived, you became someone who helps other people escape. That matters, Adrian." "I know," Adrian said. "I just wish I could tell everyone who's still in their own black room that there's a way out, that they can survive this, that they can build something beautiful on the other side of fear." "You do tell them," Marcus said. "Every time you take a case, every time you speak to students, every time you show up and fight, you tell them by living your life openly, honestly, joyfully." Adrian turned to look at his husband, his partner, his best friend, his home. "We did okay, didn't we? Despite everything, we built something good." "We built something amazing," Marcus corrected. He pulled Adrian close. "And we're not done building yet." They flew back to Los Angeles holding hands, back to their house and their dog and their work and their community. Back to the city that had given Adrian a second chance at life, at love, at becoming fully himself. Sometimes Adrian still thought about that black room, the fear, the uncertainty, the moment when everything hung in the balance. But he didn't think of it with dread anymore. He thought of it as the beginning of his real life, the place where he met Marcus, the place where his future began. And on difficult days when cases were lost, when clients were deported, when the system seemed impossible to change, Adrian would remember that scared man in the black room and the immigration officer who showed him kindness. He'd remember that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see another person's humanity, one person willing to fight, one person willing to love without conditions. He'd built a life from that foundation, a career, a marriage, a home, and every day he worked to give other people the same chance he'd been given. Every day he tried to be someone else's Marcus, the person who walks into the black room and offers hope. Because that, Adrian had learned, was what love really meant, not just romantic love, though he had that in abundance, but love as action, love as justice, love as the fierce, unshakable conviction that every person deserves to be seen, to be safe, to be themselves. And in the end, isn't that what we're all fighting for? The right to be ourselves, to love who we love, to build lives that feel true and whole and ours. Adrian had that now, and he spent every day trying to help others find it too. The black room had been his beginning, but it was far from his ending. His ending, if endings even exist for love stories still being written, was this: a house in Highland Park, a husband who knew him completely, a dog sleeping at his feet, and the absolute certainty that he belonged exactly where he was. He was home. Finally, permanently, joyfully home. The end.